In the desert, amid dust and silence, an ordinary man received an extraordinary task. His name, nearly forgotten in the pages of history, echoed through the heavens when the creator of the universe called him directly Bezalel, a name meaning "in the shadow of God," an anonymous artist, without grand titles, without stories of great battles or spectacular miracles, just a man with skilled hands and a willing heart. What would make a simple craftsman worthy of being mentioned by name in the Holy Scriptures? How could an ordinary man create something so majestic that it would represent God's very presence on earth? This is the story of a hidden talent that became the most perfect physical expression of heavenly glory. In a world where we chase recognition and fame, Bezalel shows us another perspective, that of a man who worked away from the spotlight, but whose creations remain the most meticulously described in the entire biblical narrative. A man who shaped beauty from raw materials, transforming metals, woods, and fabrics into an earthly reflection of eternal glory. This story brings a perspective on creativity and divine purpose that few know. Who was this man who received the breath of God's creative spirit? What did his hands build, and why does his work still resonate through the ages as a testament to the fusion of human and divine? Join this journey to discover how the first artist mentioned in the Bible transformed the invisible into visible, and how his story can illuminate the hidden purpose in every human talent. The sun beat down relentlessly on the vast Sinai desert, a landscape of extremes where day brought suffocating heat and night a biting cold. In this arid setting, an entire nation wandered in search of their promised land. Imagine a mobile city of more than 2 million people, their tents stretching as far as the eye could see. This was Bezalel's world. A man born into Egyptian slavery where the Hebrews had lived for over 4 centuries. Like any slave, Bezalel probably worked under the taskmaster's whip, molding bricks for Egypt's grand monuments. Ancient Egypt was the epicenter of architectural grandeur. Pyramids, temples, and palaces stood as witnesses to pharaonic power. It was in this environment that Bezalel grew up. Grandson of Hur from the tribe of Judah, he belonged to a respected lineage. Hur was known for having assisted Moses in the battle against the Amalekites, holding up his arms while the leader prayed for victory. Bezalel therefore carried a legacy of service and faithfulness. In Egypt, the Israelites lived in an atmosphere saturated with sophisticated art and craftsmanship. The Egyptians were masters of metallurgy, sculpture, painting, and weaving. Their craftsmen created objects of unparalleled beauty, from delicate jewelry to colossal monuments. It was in this cultural melting pot that Bezalel's skills likely developed. Imagine a young Hebrew closely observing Egyptian masters, absorbing techniques, learning about materials, developing an eye for details and proportions. Though a slave, his natural talents couldn't be suppressed. His hands, destined to create beauty, were temporarily redirected to forced labor. Life changed dramatically when Moses returned to Egypt. The plagues, the liberation, the crossing of the Red Sea, extraordinary events that transformed a nation of slaves into a free people. Bezalel now walked through the desert with his compatriots, carrying not only his physical belongings, but also the knowledge accumulated during generations in Egypt. It was a time of transition and uncertainty. The Israelites had left behind oppression, but also the security of a familiar life. In the desert, they faced daily challenges, the search for water, dependence on manna, dangers from hostile peoples they encountered along the way. The promise of a land flowing with milk and honey seemed distant. It was in this context that Moses ascended Mount Sinai to receive divine instructions. For 40 days and 40 nights, the leader remained on the mountain, while the people waited anxiously in the plains below. What no one knew was that, beyond the tablets of the law, Moses would receive detailed instructions for building something extraordinary, a mobile sanctuary, a place where the divine and human could meet. Meanwhile, in the tents scattered throughout the camp, Bezalel went about his routine. Perhaps he carved small objects for daily use. Perhaps he helped repair utensils broken during the journey. He had no idea that his name was being mentioned at the top of the mountain, in a conversation between Moses and God himself. The world waited in silence for Moses' return. The desert remained impassive in its vastness, and Bezalel, the anonymous artist, was about to receive the call that would transform his life and leave his mark on sacred history forever. The camp buzzed with expectation when Moses finally descended from Mount Sinai. His face shone with a supernatural radiance, reflecting his encounter with the divine. In his hands were the tablets of the law, but in his mind a much more elaborate project. The leader gathered the assembly of Israelites. Among the crowd, Bezalel listened, not imagining that his name would be the first called. "The Lord has called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, grandson of Hur, from the tribe of Judah," Moses announced. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some heads turned, looking for the man mentioned. "And he has filled him with the Spirit of God, giving him wisdom, understanding and knowledge in all kinds of craftsmanship." Bezalel felt the weight of all eyes. For a moment the desert seemed to fall silent. The man who had always worked in the shadows was now exposed to the full light of the divine call. His hands, calloused from years of work, trembled slightly. This wasn't just an invitation to any job. It was a divine commission. Moses continued describing the Tabernacle project, a portable sanctuary of impressive complexity, a tent made with the most precious materials: gold, silver, bronze, purple, crimson and blue fabrics, rare woods, precious stones. Each detail had a purpose. Each measurement was precise. Each element carried deep symbolism. The task before Bezalel was monumental. He was to create the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest overlaid with pure gold, crowned with golden cherubim with outstretched wings. He was to forge a solid gold lampstand in the form of an almond tree, with buds, flowers, and 7 lamps, an altar of incense, a table for the showbread, a bronze altar for sacrifices, a basin for purification. The specifications continued, detailed and precise: curtains woven with colored threads and decorated with cherubim, gold-plated boards, elaborate fittings, skin coverings, a project combining functionality with transcendent beauty, a task requiring not only technical skill but spiritual understanding as well. Alongside Bezalel, Moses named Oholiab from the tribe of Dan as chief assistant. The two men exchanged glances, now united by a purpose greater than their individual lives. The responsibility was immense, the deadline tight, the resources dependent on the people's generosity. The next morning, the donation campaign began. Moses called on the people to bring their precious objects for the sanctuary's construction. The response was surprising. Men and women arrived carrying bracelets, earrings, rings, and gold necklaces. They brought fine linen, animal skins, acacia wood, spices for the anointing oil. So many were the offerings that days later, Moses had to ask them to stop bringing more. Bezalel set up his workshop in the camp, an open space where metal would be melted, wood would be carved, fabrics would be woven. He gathered other craftsmen, passing on the instructions received, distributing tasks according to each person's skills. The project took shape first in his mind, then in his hands. The first challenge was casting the gold. Under the scorching desert heat, Bezalel built furnaces where the precious metal would be melted and molded. The process required absolute precision. One mistake could mean wasting valuable material. More than that, each piece represented not just material wealth, but spiritual devotion, donations made with sincere hearts. While working on the gold lampstand, Bezalel faced a moment of uncertainty. The piece had to be hammered from a single piece of gold, without joints or welds, work that required strength and delicacy simultaneously. His hands hesitated briefly. That's when he felt something inexplicable, a mental clarity, a renewed confidence, an inspiration that seemed to come from outside himself. The spirit that Moses had mentioned was now manifesting, guiding his hands. Days turned into weeks. The work continued incessantly. Each created piece was tested, measured, compared with the received specifications. Precision was fundamental. This wasn't an ordinary project where approximations would be acceptable. It was the earthly dwelling of the eternal, and every detail mattered. In moments of extreme fatigue, Bezalel contemplated the greater purpose of his work. He remembered slavery in Egypt, where his skills served false gods and arrogant pharaohs. Now his hands were creating a space dedicated to the true God, a meeting place between heaven and earth. The construction of the Ark of the Covenant was particularly significant. This wooden box overlaid with pure gold would house the tablets of the law, testimony to the covenant between God and his people. Bezalel worked with special reverence on this piece. Each hammer blow on the gold, each carving in the wood was a silent prayer. When he finished the cherubim that crowned the ark's cover, he paused for a moment, admiring how their outstretched wings created a space, the very place where the divine presence would manifest. One of the most challenging moments was creating the ephod for the high priest. This special garment, woven with colored threads and adorned with precious stones, represented the tribes of Israel. Bezalel worked side by side with the women weavers, guiding the complex pattern. When the stones needed to be engraved with the names of the tribes, his hand did not tremble. Each letter was inscribed with precision, preserving a people's identity in enduring stones. As pieces were completed, respect for Bezalel grew in the camp. People watched with admiration as the sanctuary took shape. What had once been just metals, woods, and fabrics was transformed into something transcendent, beauty emerging from chaos. order manifesting amid the disorganized desert. When the last nail was hammered, the last fabric hung, the last detail reviewed, Bezalel stepped back. The tabernacle was complete. Externally, it looked like an ordinary tent, covered with animal skins for protection against the elements, but its interior gleamed with gold, shimmered with colorful fabrics, and each object reflected masterful craftsmanship. Moses inspected everything, comparing it with the instructions received on the mountain. There were no discrepancies. Each measurement was correct, each detail executed according to the heavenly model. The leader looked at Bezalel, recognizing the miracle that had occurred. An ordinary man, empowered by the divine spirit, had transformed an ethereal vision into tangible reality. The day of consecration arrived. The tabernacle was erected according to instructions. The utensils were placed in their positions. Aaron, the high priest, wore the sacred clothes created by Bezalel's hands. The anointing oil was poured out, and then before the wondering eyes of all the people, the cloud of divine presence descended upon the tabernacle, filling it with indescribable glory. Bezalel watched from a distance. His work was completed. The invisible had become visible. The divine had found dwelling among humans, and his hands, simple human hands, had been the instrument for this bridge between worlds. What few know about Bezalel is that his name carries a profound meaning that reveals the essence of his mission. Bezalel literally means in the shadow of God, or under God's protection. This man worked not just as an ordinary craftsman, but as someone who operated in the very shadow of the Creator, reflecting the divine creative impulse through human hands. This detail illuminates a rarely explored aspect of the narrative. Bezalel was the first human mentioned in the Bible as being filled with the Spirit of God. Before the great prophets, before the powerful kings, it was an artist who received this special distinction, a surprising recognition of creativity's importance in the divine plan. The Bible records that Bezalel received skill in all kinds of craftsmanship, a Hebrew expression encompassing an impressive variety of techniques. He mastered metallurgy, working with gold, silver, and bronze. He was skilled in cutting precious stones. He knew carpentry, transforming raw wood into sacred furniture. He understood the art of weaving, guiding the creation of the most elaborate fabrics. In an era without art schools or technical manuals, this diversity of talents was extraordinary. Even more surprising is the fact that, although he grew up in slavery, Bezalel possessed knowledge that rivaled that of the most sophisticated Egyptian craftsmen. Some scholars suggest he may have learned by observing the masters who built pharaonic temples and tombs. Others believe his knowledge transcended conventional learning, being directly infused by the divine spirit. An often ignored aspect is how Bezalel worked in community. He wasn't a solitary genius, creating in isolation. He led a diverse team of craftsmen, delegating tasks, teaching techniques, supervising collective work. In a profound sense, he was the first art mentor recorded in biblical history, multiplying his knowledge through others. The narrative reveals another fascinating element. The tabernacle was the first communal artwork described in Scripture. Men donated gold and silver, women wove linen and goat hair, leaders offered precious stones. Each Israelite contributed according to their ability. Bezalel coordinated this collective expression of devotion, transforming individual donations into a coherent and magnificent whole. It's rarely noted that the Tabernacle project reversed the purpose of the skills the Israelites had developed in Egypt. The same techniques used to glorify false gods and pharaohs now served the true God. The hands that built pyramids now raised a sanctuary for the liberator. A powerful declaration of redemption, not only of the people, but of their skills and talents. The biblical text mentions that Bezalel knew how to make designs. This expression in the original Hebrew suggests more than simple technical skill. It implies the ability to conceive, plan, and visualize the final result before beginning the work. Bezalel wasn't just a skilled executor, but a true designer, capable of translating abstract concepts into concrete forms. Another surprising revelation is in the contrast between the tabernacle and the golden calf. While Bezalel patiently worked following precise instructions, Aaron and the impatient people melted their jewelry to create an instant idol. On one side, disciplined creativity in service to truth. On the other, impulsive creativity, producing a falsification of the divine. Both used gold, both applied artistic techniques, but with radically different purposes. Ancient Jewish texts suggest that Bezalel's wisdom went beyond technical mastery. They say he understood the mysteries of the universe's creation. Just as the letters of the alphabet formed the world through the divine word, Bezalel used his art to reconfigure matter, echoing on a smaller scale the primordial creative process. His work wasn't mere decoration, but a symbolic recreation of the cosmos. A detailed observation of the materials used in the tabernacle reveals something profound. Gold representing divinity, silver symbolizing redemption, bronze indicating judgment, blue evoking heaven, purple suggesting royalty.
scarlet remembering sacrifice, fine linen representing purity. Each element carried meaning beyond its practical function or aesthetic value. Bezalel didn't just create a building, but a three-dimensional sermon. The tabernacle that Bezalel built became the model for the future Temple of Solomon, a much larger and more permanent structure. Centuries later, craftsmen followed the same pattern, expanding the vision made concrete by Bezalel's hands. His legacy continued shaping Israelite worship for generations, far beyond his own life. Interestingly, Bezalel's skills were recognized not only for the initial construction, but also for the repair and maintenance of the tabernacle during the desert journey. The texts suggest he trained a generation of craftsmen who continued his work, ensuring that the sanctuary remained functional and beautiful during the 40 years of wandering. Many presume that Bezalel worked exclusively with visual elements, but the text mentions his ability with all kinds of craftsmanship. Scholars suggest this could include musical composition, the creation of instruments for worship, and possibly even the development of the first structured liturgies for use in the tabernacle. His influence may have extended to all forms of creative expression in worship. Bezalel's historical moment is also significant. He emerged precisely when the Israelites were transitioning from a religion based on personal encounters with God to a more structured system of community worship. His work helped create the visual vocabulary that would allow a people of former slaves to understand abstract spiritual concepts through tangible symbols. Perhaps the most moving aspect of Bezalel's story is the contrast between his monumental responsibility and his relative anonymity. After completing the tabernacle, he essentially disappears from the biblical record. There is no mention of special rewards, positions of honor, or continued recognition. He fulfilled his mission and then returned to the shadows, true to the meaning of his own name. To discover more fascinating stories like this, simply subscribe to the channel. Rarely explored biblical narratives await to expand your understanding of sacred history and its relevance for today. Bezalel's story resonates deeply with the human search for purpose and meaning. In this contemporary world obsessed with fame and instant recognition, he represents a radical contrast, a master whose greatest work remained unsigned, an artist whose masterpiece bore his name engraved nowhere. Bezalel's relative anonymity confronts us with a crucial question: do we create to glorify ourselves or to serve a greater purpose? In the culture of social media, where every action seeks validation through likes and shares, Bezalel's humility offers an alternative perspective. He worked not to appear, but to create a space where the encounter between the divine and the human could happen. Each person carries unique talents, abilities that often remain dormant or underutilized. Bezalel's specific calling reminds us that our gifts are not accidents. Whether the ability to create beauty, to organize systems, to solve complex problems, or to care for other beings, each skill can be the meeting point between heaven and earth when dedicated to something beyond ourselves. The diversity of skills brought together in the tabernacle's construction reflects our fundamental interdependence. Bezalel, though central to the narrative, did not work alone. He needed weavers, carpenters, metal casters, stone cutters, an entire community contributing their specific gifts. In an age that celebrates extreme individualism, this ancient story reminds us that humanity's greatest works are often collective endeavors. There's a creative tension in Bezalel's story that we still experience today: technical precision versus spiritual inspiration. He followed meticulous instructions, exact measurements, rigorous specifications. Simultaneously, he was filled with the Spirit. This combination of discipline and inspiration offers a model for human excellence that transcends the false dichotomy between science and art, between technique and intuition. The tabernacle that Bezalel built was simultaneously functional and beautiful, practical and symbolic. This integration of utility and aesthetics challenges our modern tendency to separate the useful from the beautiful, the practical from the artistic. In a world that often sacrifices beauty in the name of efficiency, or abandons functionality in the name of artistic expression, Bezalel demonstrates that the greatest human works serve both purposes simultaneously. Bezalel's masterpiece was mobile, designed to be disassembled, transported, and reassembled as the people journeyed. This characteristic resonates with our contemporary reality of constant change and frequent transitions. We live in tense, not permanent temples. Our spirituality, our relationships, our purposes must be flexible enough to accompany life's unpredictable journeys. When we observe today's world, with its monumental structures, impressive technologies, and extraordinary achievements, it's easy to forget that at the heart of every human advancement are craftsmen like Bezalel, people working patiently, applying skill and inspiration to projects that transcend their individual lives. The builders of medieval cathedrals, who began works that would only be completed by their grandchildren, shared the same spirit. At the beginning of this story, we asked what would make a simple craftsman worthy of being mentioned by name in the sacred scriptures. The answer now emerges clearly. Bezalel represents the human capacity to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, to elevate the material to the spiritual, to physically manifest what can only be imagined. He is the symbol of all human hands that collaborate with the divine in the continuous creation and renewal of the world. When your fingers touch an instrument, when your hands prepare a meal with care, when your intellect solves a complex problem, when your empathy comforts a wounded heart, you walk in Bezalel's footsteps. The anonymous craftsman who teaches us that true greatness often works in the shadows, not seeking recognition, but simply doing what hands were made to do. In the shadow of God, Bezalel discovered his purpose. Perhaps it is in this same shadow, away from the spotlight of fame and public recognition, that each person finds the deepest meaning for their own talents and abilities.